Good morning and welcome to the KDKA-TV Sunday edition. I'm Stacy Smith. Hope is a necessity for normal life and the major weapon against the suicide impulse. Those were the thoughts of legendary psychiatrist Dr. Carl Menninger, part of a family of psychiatrists who founded the respected Menninger Foundation and Clinic in Topeka, Kansas in 1919. Well, today Americans are paying closer attention to the growing problem of suicide. Data from the Centers for Disease Control show that suicide is the second leading cause of death in America for people between the ages of 15 and 34. Suicide by hanging recently ended the life of two prominent people, designer Kate Spade and celebrity chef and television personality Anthony Bourdain. Carter Evans of CBS has more on how these two deaths within a week have forced people to take a new look at a subject often marked by stigma and shame.
At the New York restaurant where Anthony Bourdain made his mark as a chef before becoming a famous writer and TV star, fans are still trying to understand why he would take his own life.
It's so upsetting when you feel like someone is such a light to the world, a positive influence, and they feel the need to leave.
The celebrity chef was filming in France for his wildly successful show Parts Unknown when he apparently committed suicide in his hotel room. Bourdain's death and fashion designer Kate Spade's suicide earlier in the week came as the Centers for Disease Control released a new study showing nationwide suicides are up 25% since 1999. In 2016 alone, nearly 45,000 people took their own lives, and more than half had no known mental health condition. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the biggest increase is among people in the same age range as Bourdain and Spade.
Middle-aged Americans, and particularly white men and women, their rate has risen the most, between 50 and 65%.
On CBS this morning, Dr. Gail Saltz said anyone can look for the signs.
So if you see someone becoming socially more isolated, withdrawing, they're feeling sad, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling worthless, yes, then those are people you want to be talking to.
And she says the conversation should be direct.
When they start to talk about it, then you say, have you thought about harming yourself? Have you thought about taking your life? Be really direct. It is a myth that asking about suicide will cause someone to commit suicide.
Calls to some suicide hotlines have increased dramatically following the high-profile deaths. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in this country. The CDC says someone takes their own life every 12 minutes. Carter Evans, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The Centers for Disease Control estimates that the financial cost of suicide and suicide attempts at $59 billion a year from lost productivity and medical expenses. Since suicide is an underreported crime, that total could be as high as $93.5 billion. This morning on the KDKA-TV Sunday edition, the personal stories of two people whose lives have been touched by suicide and suicide attempts, and what they are doing now to try to make a difference. Colleen Seibert is the chair of Loss and Healing Programs for the Western Pennsylvania chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. She lost her sister, Leanne Adele Duke, to suicide 13 years ago. And Reverend Jim Bertotti is pastor at St. Peter's Reformed Church in Zelienople in Butler County. He attempted suicide at the age of 18, but now leads a support group for those affected by suicide. David Trimman, the executive editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, is with us for this morning's discussion. I want to thank both of you for being with us this morning on the KDKA-TV Sunday edition. I want to go ahead and delve right away into what we just mentioned, and that is that you both have been touched by the experience of suicide in some shape, manner, or form. Colleen, first of all, with your sister, what happened?
So I'm the youngest of three girls, and my middle sister Leanne was a very well-respected nurse, very well-educated, godmother to my two children, but for most of her adult life suffered from depression. And I think due to the stigma that surrounds depression and mental illness and mental health, she did not take the proper care of herself, and she ultimately I say lost her battle with depression and died by suicide 13 years ago.
Even though she was in the medical profession, and you say there's a stigma to
Correct. Correct. She did a very good job of taking care of other people and not that good of a job of taking care of herself. And much of that was because of the stigma that surrounded mental illness and depression. She didn't want other people to know.
She didn't want other people to know. Well, growing up, did you have any indication at that time? Because you said when she reached her adult life is when the depression set in.
Yep, not until she was in her early 20s did we notice that she started suffering from depression, and she had several other attempts prior to her death in January of 2000.
Did you know about the other attempts?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea what set off her depression? What was she
No.
depressed about?
No.
No. It's just one of those things.
I think that part of the issue is that people that have depression and mental illness suffer from a disease just like anybody else that can be afflicted with cancer and things like that. So there's generally maybe no known rationale behind the depression.
All right, you were affected because of a family member who committed suicide. Jim, you tried to take your own life. What
That's
happened?
correct.
When?
When I was 18 years old, I had been molested as a young child between the ages of 9, 10, 11, and just kind of pushed all that down, suppressed it. You know, it was at an age where you really couldn't talk to your parents about this kind of thing. You had no one to talk to, so you just let it go, and I just kind of swept it under the rug. And then at the age of 18, my abuser came back and pretty much laid some pretty ultimatums that this is what I'm going to do, or else I will let your parents know, I will. And the last thing I could imagine was my parents hearing what had happened and putting them in a situation where a family member did this to their son. And so, so I was unable to really rationalize through this whole thing, hit a depressive point in my life, and figured it would be easier if I just took myself out of the equation. That would be the easiest thing. No one would get hurt, no one would be in pain, no one would sense what I was feeling. It would just be a
So it was a
private.
big rationale that you approached this with.
Yeah, I believe so. At the time, I thought it was rational.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at it, it was irrational.
So both of you are involved in dealing with people who have impulses to suicide. And tell us what was the process of getting involved. Colleen, you want to start?
Absolutely. Actually, directly after my sister passed away in 2005, I became aware of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and we actually set up a page in lieu of flowers and things like that so people could donate to the cause. That was my first foray into the AFSP. Since then, I've been a volunteer. I'm now a board member. I chair the loss and healing programs, and Pastor Jim and I started a support group for survivors of suicide loss 3.5 years ago. We meet once a month, the third Wednesday of every month, and we hope that we bring comfort
Agreed.
and hope to those that have also lost others to suicide.
Jim?
I think my rationale behind really getting involved is a passion so that people would not follow the same path that I felt. The hopelessness, the despair, the anger, the isolation. And so being able to help other people that are going through that truly is a significant opportunity for me. Sometimes giving the parents or the loved ones an idea of what their loved one might have been feeling at that time helps. It doesn't solve the why, but it helps them to maybe get a glimpse of what their loved one was going through at the time.
So in the wake of the Bourdain and Spade episodes, suicides, a lot of people were saying, well, look at these people, they're on the top of the world, top of their game, they have health, they have at least physical health, they have wealth, they have prominence, things are going well enough. That doesn't matter, does it?
No.
Yeah, I don't
No.
think so.
Suicide and mental illness know no enemies.
So you can look at somebody who is flourishing and is a productive member of society, and that person might be suffering internally in a way we don't know, right?
Correct. A secret suffering.
And how do you find out? And how do family members find out?
Boy, isn't that the answer? If we had that, we could, I think, really
What do you
make an
tell
impact.
people who are facing the possibility that family members might commit this act?
I always come at it from a very spiritual end, being my background, being a pastor of a church. And so I look to the hope that God and Christ can bring to that individual, hopefully. And so that's where I like to see people coming together to help one another get past the things that they're suffering with. Now, it takes an openness on their part to really let us know what it is. Is it a relationship issue? Is it a health issue? Is it a financial issue? I mean, there's so many underlying currents that can lead people to that feeling of hopelessness and despair. If we can give them a sense of hope that is found in a community of faith, in a God that loves them, man, that's where I'm going to direct them.
I think that, you know, in that regard, in the past, again, due to the that surrounds mental health, depression, suicide, it's an issue that hasn't been talked about enough. And so the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, our support group, really is there to open that conversation and to make sure that we are talking about mental health, depression, and suicide, and bringing that to the forefront. If you think somebody in your family, a loved one, a friend, a coworker, is suffering, the best thing you can do is to ask directly, you know, are you feeling hopeless? Are you contemplating suicide? And if that is the case, then somebody wants to talk
So both
about
of you have your psychological Geiger counters tuned pretty high.
Yes.
And of course, it's impossible to diagnose in a distance, but do you think you might have, with your skills and experience, might have in the Bourdain and Spade cases identified them as suicide potentials?
I think it would depend on the relationship that we had with that individual. You know, if it was someone that we could, or they felt comfortable confiding in us, then I think that there would be a higher chance of that. But again, being able to perceive some maybe behavioral traits or things that are going on, you can look to that and say, how can we help this individual? What do I know that would be able to help this person get through whatever it is?
Of course, there's a whole lot of people who say, well, Kate Spade, what does she need help for? She's in great shape.
Oh, agreed. But
that's the tyranny of success and wealth.
That's correct.
Right? Yeah.
That's exactly right.
We will continue our discussion and delve more into the reasons why and perhaps what you can do if you know of someone who might be in this situation, and when the KDPG Sunday edition continues.